86 million Americans depend on traditional defined benefit plans for their future income. As the great work of the General Accountability Office has shown in 2008, led by Ms. Boberg, who's with us this morning, the number of pension plans that are investing in hedge funds and private equity funds is growing rather precipitously. Upwards of about 91%, I believe the GAO study says, are involved in hedge funds, and a slightly smaller number in private equity. I may have that reversed, but it's a growing. It is 91 in private equity, and I think 70 in hedge funds it is now, or a number close to that. And although one cannot be exact about the level of investment in those funds, it's certainly in the hundreds of billions of dollars. And of course, similar choices are being made by individuals in defined contribution plans as well. I want to say emphatically from the beginning, I think the most important principle governing fiduciary decision-making in defined benefit plans is diversification of assets. I think that a prudent fiduciary is someone who understands well the diversification of risk and reward. Given that principle, I am not in any way interested in any statutory or arbitrary limitation on investments in such assets for pension funds or anyone else. I don't think it's the job of elected officials to favor or disfavor any class of investments. I think we should be agnostic as to classes of investments. I think that we should write laws that impose high standards of fiduciary responsibility on those whose job it is to make those decisions. And I think we should then essentially get out of the way and let them exercise their fiduciary duty. In order for people to exercise their fiduciary duty in a proper way, transparency is needed. In other words, one cannot really understand the potential risks and rewards of an investment if the data which underlie the dynamics of that investment are not easily and readily understandable. In most cases, most classes of investments have a long history of regulatory disclosure and frankly have a measure of transparency that comes from the principle that in a marketplace people vote with their feet. So when one invests in a frequently traded public stock or public bond, market fluctuations, when one sees millions of shares traded or billions of transactions occur, will let one know what one's peers think about the value of an asset. That kind of information is not readily available when it comes to alternative investments. They are typically thinly traded. In many cases, they are illiquid. In many cases, there may be no market at all that would help one determine what the marketplace thinks about the value of an asset. Again, I emphatically believe that this phenomenon should not exclude these classes of assets from consideration by fiduciary trustees and defined benefit plans. I don't think that at all. But I certainly think that those fiduciaries ought to have ample information to real-time relevant information so they can properly discharge their responsibilities as fiduciaries. This, I believe, is not an ideological or political question. It is an empirical and analytical one. And the purpose of this morning's hearings is to assemble 4 individuals who have great experience in this area, and I believe great expertise in this area, and we welcome them to the subcommittee. The questions we're interested in hearing about this morning are, what tools are presently available to pension plan fiduciaries in evaluating alternative investments? How complete or incomplete are these tools? How useful are these tools? What might supplement them and make them more useful? What rules and standards govern those who prepare these tools? When one relies on an audited financial statement from a hedge fund or private equity fund to make a fiduciary decision, what standards would govern the quality of that audited financial statement? What do we know about the competence and preparation of the preparer? If there were conflicts of interest, what standards or rules would at least disclose or hopefully prohibit such a conflict of interest? The purpose of this hearing is for those of us on the committee to get a sense of how those who are in this fiduciary world view the efficacy of the tools that are available to them, and to evaluate whether, if at all, changes are necessary to public policy. I want to say from the outset, I believe that public policy does not necessarily mean statutes or regulations. It can come in the form of guidance from the Department of Labor. It could come in other less formal iterations. But at the end of the day, here is what we're interested in achieving. We want to develop a body of knowledge that would give us a level of assurance that when fiduciaries are carrying out their fiduciary responsibility and making a decision to invest or not invest in pension funds, in a private equity fund or hedge fund, that that decision is being made in full disclosure, that that decision is being made with the benefit of tools that would help one evaluate the true value of that asset, so that in diversifying one's portfolio, the fiduciary can make the best decision for those who depend on that decision. Our interest here is obviously beyond the philosophical and academic. Our real agenda is to prevent from ever occurring a taxpayer-subsidized bailout of pension funds. Our concern here is that, to some extent explicitly and to some extent implicitly, the taxpayers of the United States stand behind defined benefit plans in our country. So we not only have an interest in fairness for those who depend on those funds for their income, but we certainly have an interest in protecting the taxpayers of the country against any sort of obligation that would require them to rescue a failed fund. The best defense against failure is diversification. The best principle of diversification is transparent understanding the investments through which a fiduciary can invest or not invest.